Wonderful. We will get started now. There's lots of you coming in. I'm sure there'll be a few more people, but we'll get the session underway. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the Barriers to Fundraising, What Stops People Donating and How to Overcome These session. Proudly presented to you by the National Student Fundraising Association. My name's Callum and I am your co-host today. Just to confirm that we will be recording this session. So if you aren't comfortable with potentially being in the recording, you can leave now and we will be sharing the sessions later on after the festival. I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce Jamie Parsons. Jamie is the Student Fundraising Coordinator at Hope for Children and has been around in the student fundraising area for a few years now. So he's got plenty of knowledge to bring you. As we've been doing already, please use the chat box on the side to talk to each other. We've also got the Q&A function. So if you've got any questions throughout the session, then please put them in the Q&A box. You should be able to see all the questions that are submitted. And if there's any that you think are really relevant that you'd also like to hear the answer to, then you can upvote them. And that just lets us know that these are really popular questions and we'll make sure that Jamie comes around to these. We'll try and give Jamie the questions at certain points if they're relevant, but if not and they're more generic, then we'll leave them to the end where we can have a bit more of a extended Q&A session. That's it from me though, so I'm going to hand over to Jamie now to get started.
Amazing. Thank you, Callum, and thank you everyone for joining this session. It's really nice to see so many of you in the room. Some familiar names and faces, even though I can't see your faces, and lots of new people as well, which is really exciting. So yeah, this session is all about barriers to fundraising. As Callum said, I'm Jamie Parsons. I'm Student Fundraising Coordinator at Hope for Children. And prior to that, I was a part of Carnival Rag at Birmingham, firstly as Extreme Events Coordinator, then as Treasurer, whilst Callum was President himself. And I helped organise last year's Student Fundraising Conference in Birmingham. So a little bit different this year, but no doubt you'll still get loads from it. And whilst I'm here, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the whole team at Organised Fun, including Rosie, for all their hard work putting this together, and of course the team at NASFA for putting this all together. A little bit different, as I said, but hopefully we'll be back stronger next year and we can still enjoy all the great sessions they've got on offer. So as I said, I'm the Student Fundraising Coordinator at Hope for Children. We've worked in student fundraising for a number of years, and this session has sort of put together all our experiences from our time. If you do want to chat to us about how we can work with your uni or your RAG, please feel free to get in touch. I've popped our email address on there, but after this session, we'll also be going to the coffee shop. I'm sure Callum will put the details in the chat during this presentation. But if your question doesn't get answered or you want to talk about something in a bit more detail, please come along to that. Or if you can't make it or you're watching this on record, then feel free to drop me an email. So I think that's all the housekeeping done. What is going to be included in the session? Well, what we want to do is try and help you understand some of the reasons behind why people don't necessarily donate to your cause, and most importantly, how we can overcome these issues. So what we want for you to take away from this presentation is a better understanding, more confidence when you're fundraising, but we also want to give you actual real life tips and things that you can implement and share with your RAGs or your supporters to allow them to get the most out of their fundraising and overcome these issues before they even face them. So what stops people from donating? Now, in a normal sort of session where we could all chat freely, I'd normally throw this open to you, we'd have a big discussion and get you involved. Obviously can't do that, but what I have done is I have used our wonderful Hope for Children ambassadors. This is why we came up with this session. It's because at our first training session this year, we asked students what reasons perhaps they haven't donated in the past, what issues do they think other people will have when it comes to donating. So I've put some of these together. These are just some of the phrases and some of the things you might recognise. It's not necessarily all of them. Some are perhaps more important than others, some are more complex than others, but it gives you a flavour of the sort of things we're going to be covering in this session and how we can overcome these problems. So we decided to break it down into 5 key areas. So I'm going to go through those 5 key areas individually, and then there's a few points at the end as well. As Callum said earlier, if you've got any questions during this, if there's any that are sort of relative to that point, at the time I'm speaking, then by all means chuck them in and I'll try and answer them the best I can. But if any don't get answered or there's a more general question, I will come to them at the end if there's time, or happy to chat about it in the coffee shop. Cool. So the first one is opportunity and action. So this might seem like a really straightforward one, but actually one of the biggest things that stops people donating is that they actually don't get given the opportunity to donate. And one of the biggest things we find with our students is how they struggle to sometimes turn sort of the best intentions and people saying, yes, yes, I'll donate and support, into actual action and actual donations. So how can we overcome this? Well, the first thing to remember is that if you don't ask, you don't get. So according to the Charities Aid Foundation, 65% of people donated to charity in 2018, and that total was over £10 billion. So clearly there's a real strong intention from the people in this country to donate towards charity. But the thing they're looking for is somebody to go out and ask them to donate. In that report, it also says that only 35% of people were asked to donate whilst they were out on the streets. And even less than that, 17% were asked to sponsor someone. So we've got this huge proportion of people who want to donate, and then there's a much smaller percentage who are actually being asked to donate. So the biggest thing I'd say to anyone who's starting with their fundraising is make sure that you are getting the word out there that you are fundraising. It sounds so simple, but honestly, you'll be surprised the difference it can make. So the way to do this is to have a constant reminder to people that you are fundraising. Often we see people put posts up on Facebook, and these are brilliant, but as you tend to post about whatever else it is you post on your social medias about, this will get lost in all your other posts. So having something that's a constant reminder that people can go to, that contains your Just Giving link or whatever online platform you use, is really, really important. So this can be something as simple as having your profile picture with your charity t-shirt on. It could be having something in your email sign off. It could be in your bio, it could be a pinned post, but it's not just on social media as well. In your home, perhaps you could have a collection tin, as you know, in the living room, or where you tend to see people, or where you'd have them, and that just acts as a constant reminder in people's minds that you are fundraising, and it will then play on their minds that, you know, they maybe do want to donate to you, and it will perhaps get them to turn their intention into action. So the next thing is about, as I said, sort of those physical reminders and opportunities, but also understanding how best to use them. So as I said, sort of online fundraising is a real big thing at the moment. We're going to talk more about that than perhaps in-person fundraising, because it's a little bit more difficult at the moment. But when you're posting online, it's really important to think where and when you're posting. And I've heard a lot of sort of stuff this week about making sure that it's when people are online, when people are most active, and I completely agree with that when it comes to promotion and things. But when it comes to donating, you also need to think about whether someone is in an actual position to donate. Quite often when you are active online, you may not be in a position to donate. So for example, people tend to use social media a lot on a weekday morning. Perhaps they're going to work, perhaps they've just woken up. That may not necessarily be the best time for someone to donate. If you see a post asking to donate and you're about to start an 8-hour shift in work, then you might have all the best intentions in the world, but you're not necessarily going to go and donate right then. And then by the time you get home, you're too tired, you've got to do food, whatever it is, you've completely forgot about donating. It's also important to think about sort of the situation you're posting in. Is it close to payday? Is there something else going on that's going to have people's attention? And try and think about all that when you're posting. So the simple way to do that is to just ask yourself, if I saw this post now, would I donate? Would I be in a position to donate to this cause? And if the answer is no, then perhaps you can think about scheduling your post for a different time. Another simple way to encourage action is to simply think about the language you're using. Try and put a bit more of an emphasis on sort of when you want this donation. Quite often people won't understand that you have perhaps a fundraising deadline, or perhaps that you really want that donation right now. So by putting simple words in like now, or sharing perhaps that you've got a deadline coming up at the end of the week, that can help people realise the sort of urgency around donating and finally get them to donate to your page. So the second point we want to come on to is trust within charities, and this is a huge issue that I could do probably 2 presentations on. So we're going to sort of go over it quite briefly, but most importantly, sort of how you can instill trust when you are out fundraising. So this comes from the Charity Commission report, and quite a scary statistic in terms of how trusted charities are. They're actually less trusted than your average person in the street. So this is a real worry for us, and it's often the biggest reason that stops people from donating. But how can you as a fundraiser help instill trust within whilst you're fundraising? So we think a key part of it is about understanding the relationship between your fundraiser and your charity. So as a charity, you should be making sure that your charity is incredibly transparent about what they do. They should be registered with all the correct governing bodies like the fundraising regulator, and making sure that they're really open and honest and publicising all their work, and they're really, you know, transparent about where your money is going. So for example, we give all our ambassadors a fundraising handbook and a copy of our annual review, which gives them all the tools they need to understand exactly what we do as a charity. Then as a RAG, it's really important that you're asking these sort of difficult questions when it comes to deciding who you work with. Don't be scared to ask, you know, if there's something playing on your mind. If you don't have the confidence in your charity, then you're never going to be able to instill confidence when you're asking for donations. So ask for, you know, reports on the finances, ask for a better understanding, ask to find out about their trustee board, because that's going to help you feel confident and then pass that on to your fundraisers as well. You sort of build up the trust by being trustworthy. People build trust between people. So it's important that you come across trustworthy when you're out fundraising as well. And the best thing to build trust is to be knowledgeable of the charity. So make sure that you are able to answer some really simple questions that it's likely you're going to come up against when you're fundraising. Very simple questions like, where's the money going? How much of my money goes to the cause? What difference will it make? Make sure that you've got example stories, make sure you understand more about the charity's work and where it sits within the entire charity sector. And that's going to help, by you looking confident and being knowledgeable, that's going to help people build trust in you and therefore build trust in the charity. So I'm going to come back to that Charity Commission report that I spoke about earlier. And when we speak about trust, sort of the reasons that there's perhaps not so much trust. And here's some of the issues here. So clearly people want to donate, as we saw earlier, but they want to know that where their money's going. They want to know how much is going to the cause. And they just want to know the impact that they are having. So one thing that can often come up is when you're fundraising, typically if you're doing a challenge like we offer here at Hope for Children, a certain amount of your money will go to cover the costs of this. People have their own reservations about this, and that's completely fine. People can choose to fundraise in whatever way they want. But if you want your charity to be using its money correctly, if you want them to have all the correct provisions in place to make sure that they're fundraising responsibly, they're spending responsibly, and really doing the best for their beneficiaries, we do have to have these provisions, the people, and the infrastructure in place to make sure this happens. And that costs money. And the only way we can get that money is through fundraising. For example, at Hope for Children, these challenge events make up around 40% of our overall income. So without it, we would never be able to do all the amazing work that we do. So rather than me go on too much about this, because as I said, I could talk about it for ages, I want to recommend a TED talk to you. So it's from Dan Pallotta. It's A New Way to Judge Non-for-Profits. It's about 20 minutes long. And if you are interested in understanding a bit more about the ethics of fundraising and how we can sort of change the way in which we understand how charities work, I'd really recommend this talk. It's something that I always share with our teams and our fundraisers at training. And it's definitely, it allows you to understand a bit more about why the money has to go where it does. And hopefully then when you understand that, as I said, it'll help you when you're out fundraising and working with your charities within your RAG as well. By the way, if there are any questions, feel free to chip in. Callum, have we got any questions? Or?
We've got one at the moment, but I think we're best off leaving that one to the end. I think keep going for now.
Fab. Okay, cool. So I'll come on to my third point then, and this is bystander effect. So this isn't something that's just unique to fundraising. This is something that affects us in everyday life. It's the reason why you perhaps don't put your hands up in a lecture, why you're perhaps not asking a question in this session, why the bins don't get taken out at your uni house. It's because it's the belief that somebody else will do it. And whilst this might not be as detrimental when it comes to taking the bins out, when it comes to fundraising, if everyone that you are asking to donate believes that somebody else is going to donate, that's really damaging, because it means that you're never going to be able to get those donations coming in. So it's really important that we try to overcome this. And there's a few ways you can do this. So firstly, it's about having a personalized and direct request. So let's take me and Callum, for example. If I posted on Facebook just a generic status as usual, Callum might see this, but he might think, oh, that's not for me. Jamie's got however many friends on Facebook. He's not talking to me at all. If I posted it in a group chat that Callum was in, he might think, oh, okay, perhaps this is more for me, because there's much less people in a group chat than there would be on Facebook. If I went up and spoke to Callum directly, or I messaged him individually, that's going to be much more effective. There's no way he can pass that off as it being someone else. Clearly, I'm asking him to donate to my cause. And sometimes, you might feel a little bit uncomfortable messaging an individual. It's not always the best way. Sometimes a group message situation is the right way forward. But if you're more targeted with your requests, it's much more likely that people are going to sort of respond to those and action with a donation. So when you're doing that, it's also important to be really personal. Don't sort of send a blanket text out to everyone, because it's really obvious when you're doing that and it doesn't come across as genuine. Make sure you're sort of chatting to them as you normally would, and if you can just sort of raise it in your normal conversation, that's always a lot better than perhaps just going straight in off the bat. If you're just chatting to your mates, feel free to ask them about donating. It's then also important to thank your donators as well. So just as much as you're reaching out to ask for those donations, you need to reach out and thank people as well. So you should be thanking them privately. That comes across much more personal. It also encourages the chance that they will continue to support your cause in other ways. But also, by thanking people on Facebook, that can have a duo effect, or on any social media. So say, for example, I had a few different posts. I could do my next Facebook status. I could just tag them in saying, thank you for your donations. So by tagging them in, not only is my post going to appear in all of their sort of timelines and news feeds, but anyone who I perhaps have the same friendship with is going to feel some sort of responsibility and some sort of need to donate to my cause as well. So let's say I was in a five-a-side football team and two of them have already donated. If I share that those two people have donated, perhaps the other two people in the team might think, oh, if they've donated, then perhaps I should. And that's a real good way to make sure that you're showing not only your appreciation, but showing people just that everyone is responsible, and everyone can make a difference by donating. So as I said, talked a bit about language previously, but simply by putting the word you in your posts, and when you're asking, saying that you can make a difference, you are the reason we're able to make this happen. And even simple phrases such as, if each person on my newsfeed did this, or if everyone donated this much, I could do this. That can really help people overcome the bystander effect that may be stopping them from donating.
Jamie, if I can interrupt a minute, we've had a few questions come in.
Yeah.
One of them, the first one that's been upvoted by a few people, is someone has asked, thoughts on fundraising whilst ensuring you're being sensitive to the COVID-19 situation. Everyone is struggling and many have been furloughed, etc.
Yeah, so we sort of touch on that in a little bit, but the one thing I would say is it's really important to understand the situation in which you're fundraising. And actually, one thing that is important is, whilst everyone is struggling, the causes that we're fundraising for haven't gone away. So charities have been affected in terms of they're not able to fundraise at events in the same way previously. And quite often, certainly in our cases, our beneficiaries are in more need than ever before. So whilst it's completely, never put pressure on people to donate, that's really important. As we come on to in a bit, it's completely fine if people can't donate, and you should never be pressuring someone into doing so. But it is important that we continue to fundraise at these difficult times, because it's actually charities that are continuing to make a difference to people's lives. One thing we always say is to make sure that your posts about the charity are always relevant to the current situation and respectful of it. So what I mean by that is, for example, we've currently changed our work out in Uganda to provide a sort of supply centre to give out urgent food and sanitary products to make sure that people are able to look after themselves. So therefore, people fundraising for us, we're encouraging them to share that story to show that we're continuing to be proactive and there is still a need to fundraise. But yeah, as I said, it's really important that you don't step over that line. If someone says that they can't donate, don't push them, don't sort of pressure them into donating. And that's sort of part of being a responsible fundraiser as well.
Fantastic. With a few more questions, we'll go at the end, but if you carry on.
Fantastic. Fab. So our next point is donor efficacy and impact. So what this means is people tend to be worried that they can't give enough to help you sort of reach your perhaps high fundraising target, or they just can't do enough to make a difference. The example I always give here is that one of my friends, when they donated, actually texted me straight away and was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I could only give this much." You know, if people are donating, that's a really positive thing. As we just said, they don't have to donate. And that's where that appreciation comes in that I was talking about earlier. So some of the ways, as I said, is gratitude to all, and really try not to differentiate between when you're thanking people, perhaps publicly, try and not differentiate between how much they've donated. As we said, you know, a £5 donation from one person could be have a much greater financial implication on them than it could someone else. So it's really important that we're understanding that, you know, people choosing to donate to you is a really kind and generous thing, and you need to appreciate that. Also continuing to share the idea that no donation is too small, every little helps. And the best way to do this is to share some sort of breakdowns as to what different amounts can help the charity to achieve. So for example, we would say to our fundraisers, you could say £5 will help a child be provided with the school bag and supplies they need to go to school. £15 would provide them with a uniform that they wear to school, and then £35 can provide the teaching for an hour to help them understand the importance of hygiene and good hygiene practice. So you can see there I've provided 3 options that range in different sort of amounts. It shows people that even if they're donating a small amount, they're still making a difference, while still giving people the opportunity to donate more if they want to. And also, when you're thinking about your language, remember to use terms like together and we, because you want them to feel a part of your fundraising. You want them to feel a part of, you know, the progress that you are making. One other thing to bear in mind is if you have got a large fundraising target, quite often as a charity, we'll be sharing sort of smaller fundraising milestones for you to achieve. The reason we do that is because you can then share these, and whilst people may sort of think, oh, my money isn't going to make a difference in helping them achieve their overall target, if you do share these smaller targets and smaller goals, people feel like they're actually contributing and actually making a difference to your fundraising then. So it's really important that whilst you're fundraising, you set different deadlines, you set goals to achieve throughout the year, not just when you're trying to hit a target. And also, if you are doing any fundraising challenges, it's really good to try and incentivize them with donations as well. You know, if you donate this much, you can choose a song. If you do this much, you can choose where I go. If you do this much, I will travel this much. Whatever it is, having that incentivization and people feeling like their donation is making not just a difference to the people, but a difference to your fundraising is really important too. And then the final point I want to come on to is parallelism. Don't worry, I didn't have a clue what it meant either, and futility. So the idea of parallelism is this belief that it's not my problem to deal with, that the problem is too far away or the problem doesn't affect me, therefore it's not my responsibility to deal with. And futility comes in a bit like what we were talking earlier, but the idea that the problem is just so big that it's not going to be solved. You might be thinking, you know, obviously as a third sector charity, this is something we can come up against, but it can affect other charities as well, you know, medical charities who perhaps someone who's been asked to donate hasn't experienced them and therefore they don't feel that responsibility. But it's really important that you're conveying the problems and, you know, ultimately everyone's donation does help to make a difference. So the best way to overcome this is to share an individual and identifiable story. So we call them stories of hope. And in these, you want to focus on an individual. You want to focus on one person and give details about the situation they're in, the situation they've overcome, and the position they are in now, thanks to the support of the charity. And the reason you want to do that is because by sharing the story of one person, it becomes much more identifiable, and someone is much more likely to find something in common than if you share a large number or a large statistic. Because that's what you want. You want to try and build that relatability. You want people to understand the situation. And in doing that, we tend to use the phrase every child at Hope for Children, because it's okay if, you know, we are making a difference to one person's life, but this story is then replicated. So we need to make the difference for every single person. And that comes into the idea of the global response needed to the problems we face. It's completely, you know, there's so many charities out there, and I'm sure every fundraiser and every charity would say, not, you know, we're not asking for donations over another charity. We're always asking for donations alongside other charities. And that's the important thing. We can still aim to solve the problems that we're facing in the UK, but we can also do our bit to contribute to the global response to the problems we face worldwide. And for us, that is about aligning ourselves with the Sustainable Development Goals and making sure that we are, as a charity, in line with the overall mission that is happening. So another way to overcome the idea of futility is, as I said, to share the difference that has already been made. Quite often, people focus on talking about the position people can find themselves in before the support. And we tend to step away from that. It is important to understand the situation people are finding themselves in. But for us, it's much more important to share the position they're now finding themselves in, and that they have been able, you know, how they've sort of overcome those problems, and they are now thriving. They're now, you know, living a great life. And that's why we call them our stories of hope, because they're meant to provide hope. We really encourage you to sort of share the positive aspects of your story, because that resonates far more with people than not sharing that side of things. And a simple way to make sure you're doing this in your social media posts is to always be using the word because. It's all right going out and asking people to donate. It's okay, you know, going on the street, running your crazy fundraising events. But if people don't understand why they should be donating, they're less likely to do so. So make sure whatever you're doing, you are giving the reasons because. And as a RAG, I think it's really important that you give opportunities for your fundraisers to understand why RAG is such an important thing. And just to give you two examples that we've really thought have been incredible, Warwick RAG have recently done their sort of interview series with a few of the charities, including myself, talking about the impact of COVID-19 on fundraising and the charities itself. And Durham RAG have a sort of charities fair where the supporters come along and they can chat to representatives from the charity, understand a bit more about what they do and the work that's going on from the fundraising. So I think as a RAG, if you are able to provide these opportunities to allow your students and supporters to understand the reasons behind your fundraising, behind all the crazy, amazing things that you're doing, that's going to be much more beneficial when they are then asking for donations, when they're trying to fundraise, because they'll feel empowered and they'll know much more about the charity and the impact it is having. So as I say, it's sort of going to come on to this, but we jumped a little bit ahead, but that's completely fine. It's important to remember that not everyone will donate, and that is completely fine. There are so many reasons why people might not donate, not least because of the current situation that we're in. People may donate to another charity. They may have donated to you anonymously, let's not forget. They may be going through financial hardship. They may prefer to donate in different ways. Whatever it is, that's completely fine. The main things I'd say is, once again, be really respectful of that. Appreciate that you're asking someone to give up their own money to support a charity, and there's no obligation for them to do so. And a big thing here is when we talk about donations, as we have done, we typically talk about how people can donate money. But that's not the only way people can support you whilst you're fundraising. Quite often the most sort of beneficial donations could be beyond that. So perhaps someone could donate their time and support you by going along to a backpack, or they could we've seen people run yoga sessions where people go along and the money goes to charity. perhaps they could share your fundraising page. Perhaps they know a good contact that has corporate connections and can get fundraising that way. So when you're reaching out to people, as I said, be respectful, but also understand that donations don't just come in monetary forms, and people can support you in your fundraising in any way that they possibly can. So don't just focus on getting donations on that fundraising page. If you don't receive a donation from someone, or you come up against one of these barriers and you can't overcome them, don't be disheartened. As we said, not everyone's going to donate, but lots of people will. And remember that, as I said earlier, there's so many people who want to donate, and you are providing that opportunity. You might be, say, on a street collection, we've all been there, and you've sort of been there for 10, 15 minutes, and perhaps no one's donated, you start to feel a bit disheartened. Then someone comes along and donates quite a lot of money, and it sort of reminds you why you're doing what you're doing. So be respectful, don't be disheartened, and look for other opportunities for people to donate. So that's sort of coming to an end. The last thing I wanted to share, obviously we talked a lot about barriers there and how to overcome them. Don't forget that it's really positive. People, as I keep saying, want to donate, and the most powerful tool, as it says here, whilst fundraising, is you, yourself. It's the fundraisers that go out and reach into new markets and reach to new connections that otherwise charities wouldn't do so. If you think people could happily go and donate right now, but they haven't, what is it that makes them donate? It's you. Being yourself, your enthusiasm, your passion, all the incredible things that you continue to do, that's what makes a difference. So keep doing that, and hopefully some of the things we spoke about today will help you raise even more for some incredible charities. That's pretty much it for my presentation. If you've got any questions, Callum, I'm sure you don't mind chipping in.
Yes, I will just quickly give a shout out to the coffee shop. So we'll answer the questions that have been submitted now. There's a few in there. If anyone else has got any more, please do submit them. But once the session finishes at about 10:02, then we'll be going over to the coffee shop, and we'll be on table 2. And there we can have a bit more of an in-depth discussion. If there's anything that you want to kind of spend a little bit more time to chat to about Jamie or anyone else who's in the session. So do head over there if you want to. But moving on to some of the questions that we've had submitted. So the first one I'm going to pick up is from Zoe. 4 people have voted it up, so it's a popular one. And the question for you, Jamie, is, do you have any advice for keeping momentum on charity campaigns that last a few months?
That's a good question. It's something that I think all charities are trying to work out. I think the biggest thing that's relating to people right now is obviously coronavirus and how that's impacting charities. So making sure that you're continuing to show the impact that it's having, not just on perhaps your beneficiaries, but also on your fundraising, and making that clear. In terms of keeping momentum, I'd come back to that thing we were saying about the smaller goals and showing the progress you're making whilst campaigning. Share perhaps how much you've raised so far, what difference it's already made. Have you had X amount of people, new donations? By sharing sort of the impact you're having throughout the campaign, that can really make a difference and help sort of keep pushing it along. I think try not to sort of overkill it in the first few months. Make sure you, when you plan your campaign, make sure you have a few different ideas for sort of your time scale of it, but also how you're going to implement that at different stages. When it comes to RAGs, if you're perhaps looking at having a campaign, look at where it fits within your sort of student fundraising calendar and your student calendar as well, and fits in with what people are actually being expected to do right now. If you're going to try and launch a campaign that involves people being up close, that's not going to work. So understand the situation that it's in. And as I said, just try and share the positive impact that it's having throughout the campaign.
Fantastic. I hope that helps Zoe and everyone else who wanted that question to be answered. The next question is from Bianca. She's asked, in the COVID-19 context, we find it necessary to adapt to online fundraising and going cashless, something we have never focused on. I would love to know what platforms other SUs are using for their fundraising, and does anybody have stories of successful online fundraising campaigns that they would like to share? Obviously, Jamie, that's great to get your opinion on that, but I think also, Bianca, just to point out, that's a great question to carry on in the coffee shop afterwards. But Jamie, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think using online platforms has been something that people have started to do, and the coronavirus pandemic is probably just going to accelerate that a lot more. It's still worth bearing in mind that the largest donations still come in cash form, but obviously that was likely to change now following everything that's happened. In terms of platforms to use, we as a charity use Just Giving, so we have really positive with that and how it all gets implemented. In terms of some perhaps ways that you may not have thought about is we also give our supporters card readers, so they're quite inexpensive but really effective. We allow then our fundraising teams to use these when they're out running fundraising events, and trying to predict where we're going to be in a few months is quite difficult, but if we are predicting this reluctancy to using cash, then contactless payments, as we've seen from businesses that have started to open recently, is going to become much more common. And you can have that linked up to your phone. It doesn't require any sort of major work. And it can be a really nice way. I think students really appreciate having that opportunity. And, as we spoke about the opportunities, people who don't have cash on them, which is going to increase now, can just donate with a swipe of a card. But yeah, I mean, research what's best for what you're looking to get out of your online fundraising platform. Go to there's a number of providers, go to them and ask those questions and see how they can tailor it to you and your needs.
Fantastic, thank you, Jamie. And we've got one final question that's come from Ella. So Ella has asked, let's see, I'm just reading it. I'd like to have a donation button for our 3 core charities on our RAG Facebook page at the top. How can I do this for 3 charities? I'm not sure if that's something you'll be able to answer, Jamie. But
yeah, I'm not too sure. I think there's always sort of legalities around when it comes to donating to more than one charity, and I don't know what Facebook enables and doesn't. What I would say is if you as a RAG are choosing to fundraise for charities as one, you can perhaps have a joint RAG giving page and you can state on there the charities that you will give that to. I don't know the logistics of Facebook. I work for just one charity, so our donations would just come through that. It's worth sort of reaching out to Facebook and perhaps just exploring whether you could just split it. So you could have 1 week you focus on one charity, 1 week you focus on another, and then your final charity. And you could break that down into terms. You could do it different days, and that then allows each charity to have a platform to share the work they're doing. You can talk much more in depth, and perhaps that might identify with more people in being able to donate to just one of the charities.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Jamie, for that. I hope that that answers your question. And I would also recommend for those kind of questions that the NASFA Facebook group's a really useful place to ask questions about that, to see whether other groups have had similar issues or have tried to do similar things. It's a really welcoming kind of group that can answer an awful lot of questions around similar topics to that. So I'd recommend popping something like that in there to see what other people have done as well. They are all of the questions that we've had submitted. So I'll begin to wrap up. If anyone's got any last minute questions, chuck them in now and we'll try to get around to them. But if not, as mentioned, we will be carrying on the conversation in the coffee shop, and we will be on table 2. We'll be there in kind of a few minutes' time. I'd like to say a big thank you to Jamie for imparting his wisdom and knowledge on this topic. I can see lots of people in the chat saying it's been really useful and helpful. So I'm glad you'll manage to get something from it. And thank you to Jamie for taking the time.
Thank you, everyone.
Right, I'm going to close the call now so you can all head over to the coffee shop.
Yeah, thanks, Rosie.
Well done, Jamie. Bye.
Bye.